and welcome to another webinar from the Philips Lighting University. Today's webinar is titled Communicating the Value of Good Quality Light, and it is presented to you by Matthew Cobham, who is the Head of Lighting Application for Philips Professional Lighting Europe.
So we're going to spend about the next 30 minutes or so really looking at how we can communicate the value of good quality light. And really the key thing, I think, to take away hopefully from this from the next 30 minutes or so is about the different ways that are available, and hopefully this webinar will provoke some thoughts on different ways there are available to communicate the value of light. Now, we're going to structure the presentation broadly into two parts. We're going to start with looking a little bit at the visual and non-visual role of light, because obviously to communicate what you want to communicate, that's obviously important. And also take into account other senses, particularly hearing, which certainly, I mean, I'll be very interested to hear from some of you. But in most lighting presentations that I've ever seen, I very rarely, if ever even, heard people talk about the role of hearing and light. So that's one of the things we're going to at least touch on. And then we're going to spend kind of the second part of the presentation just going through a range of examples of ways that you might consider using to present whatever it is actually that you want to communicate linked to light. And obviously the things I'll go through are far from exhaustive. It's just a few examples. Right. So anyway, let's start off, as Gian already mentioned, with a question, and I'd like to draw your attention, to the right-hand side of the screen, where the answers will come up there quite shortly. We'll open a poll, and you can answer as you wish. But anyway, so the question is, what does good quality light mean for you? And then the potential answers are A, good color rendering, good color rendering, consistent color temperature, the appropriate light for the situation, light which brings comfort, light which brings emotions, and you can answer one or as many of those as you wish. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that, and then it'll just be very interesting to see what answers we get. I'll wait a little bit more. Oh, look at that. I was right, wasn't I? So most people did put the appropriate light for the situation, which is kind of quite nice. But of course, as I said, there is no right, specifically no right answer there. And what we'll look at, if you like, as we go through the presentation, is really points, if you like, which support this. So let's start by kind of considering light itself. And as you know, particularly for those of you who are lighting specialists, the eye follows brightness. And if you ever study light, that's one of the first things that you ever learn. And it's that relationship between light, but also, of course, very importantly, darkness, which matters. And that is, if you're interested in theatre, and particularly theatre lighting design, you might have come across a very well-known theatre lighting designer called Peter Brook, who wrote a wonderful book called The Empty Space. And I really recommend perhaps you Google that at the very least, because that's exactly what he deals with in this book. Is that contrast between light and darkness, and of course finding the right balance between the two. And that, of course, is one of the fundamental things, of course, in lighting design, and one of the key elements if you're going to communicate the value of light. Now, how, of course, do we actually interpret light and darkness? Well, it all goes on, of course, as you know, in the famous eye-brain system. And I guess the key takeaway from this image here is that every second we receive around about 11 million bits of information. If we put it into computer language, but we can only actually interpret around 200 bits of information, so relatively little. In other words, the brain does quite a lot of choosing for you. And of course, that means that if we link it to the relevance of this webinar, that you need to be very choosy about what you actually present. So you can actually demonstrate that in many different ways. The whole point is that, in fact, the eye brain system gets quite confused with all the messages and all the information that it receives. And if you Google on the internet, I'm sure you've seen many of these kind of these tricks, which basically work because of the large information that, or in this case, in terms of white and black that you're seeing. Of course, all the lines there are horizontal. This is an example called the cafe wall. I think you can see why. It's actually, by the way, based on a real cafe in Paris, where the tiling was set out in this way. There's another famous one called the Hermann grid, which I'm sure you've all seen. And then I also, by the way, came across this. Maybe it's the first time I've seen it. Maybe some of you have seen it as well. So maybe some of you see a face, and then some of you might see text. If you turn your head slightly to the right, you should probably see some text. So anyway, that's just in a nutshell a very, very little bit about the visual system. Basically, we receive a lot of information and we've got to interpret it. That's the key message there. But there is also, of course, the so-called non-image forming role of light. And this is a wonderful image sent to me by the well-known researcher Russell Foster, where he's done a lot of work looking at the so-called third receptor. By the way, there was a lot of information and webinars on this on the Philips Lighting University site. So I'd really, encourage you to go and have a look at that. You can look at some of the and hear some of the leading researchers in the field discuss this topic in detail. But why mention this? Well, the reason perhaps to mention this is, of course, you need to consider again your audience, who they are, where they are, and of course, all of this links to the sleep-wake cycle and the role that light has to play on that. I won't say any more than that. But again, another consideration if you're going to take your presentation link to light seriously. So that's more or less all I wanted to say about the light, if you like, entering the eye. Let's also consider a sense which, as I already mentioned, I've certainly never heard mentioned in a lighting presentation before. I'd be really interested to hear from you if you've heard this discussed. Let's just briefly think about hearing, because of course, well, if you're lucky enough to be able to hear well, then this is another very important sense if you want to communicate about light, or it's another tool. Let's think of it like that you can use. And the relationship between what you see and, of course, what you hear is not as obvious as we might think. So I'm going to show you now a very, very short clip of film, and this will hopefully explain that much better. So let's just just going to jump to this YouTube film and get that to work. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to play a couple of minutes, and yeah, I think you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about here.
At any one moment, we are being bombarded by sensory information. Our brains do a remarkable job of making sense of it all. It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, 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 ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing bar with a B.
Ba, ba, ba,
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
ba,
Take another look.
ba,
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
ba,
Now to the left of the screen.
ba,
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
ba.
Okay, I won't show any more of that, but I think you get the idea. We're very happy to send you the link for that afterwards. Then of course there's a whole explanation of how that works, which we won't go into here. But yeah, the key point is about this point about the relationship and what goes on in our brain between light and sound. So if we want to communicate about the quality of light, again, thinking about our messaging. Is of course very key. So let's then look at some examples of how that can be used in practice. Let's start off with perhaps this. This is, for those of you who know James Turrell, you will know this probably very well. This was first exhibited in the Guggenheim Museum in 1967. And it's one of his so-called corner projections. And so, for those of you who don't know it, I will explain it very briefly. What you can see there, I hope anyway, depending on how it comes out on your screen, is what looks like a cube. In fact, there is nothing there at all. There's a corner of a room. You can particularly see that actually in the bottom image, I think. And then there's a gobo projected image of a form there, and then there's extra brightness directly in the corner of the room there projected. So of course you need to be standing in exactly the right place for this illusion, in a way, light illusion to take place. So that's an example of course, influencing people. That in this case, of course, that might be done with text to get people to stand in the right place, and then presenting something to them. Now, okay, that's the work of a great light artist. Let's then begin to take this a little bit a step further and consider what happens in reality. If you're working in the lighting industry. So very often, of course, we hear about and we talk about lux. And so this, is a very kind of typical plan of the representation of lux in a space. And this might be appropriate, of course, for what you want to communicate about a certain project. So this is not saying this is good or bad, and every example I'm going to show here is not saying that they're good or bad. It might be what you want to communicate. For example, if it's linked to the energy consumption, for example, in the space, and the relationship you want to make there with the amount or the quantity of light anyway in the space. But obviously, you don't see lux; it's all reflected. Otherwise, we don't see light itself. So then, another value, if you like, that you might want to communicate on is actually how you can use light to actually encourage people to use the space in a different way. Here I'm showing you really kind of a summarized version of the results from a piece of research which was used in a retail project, where in this case, they were able to find that by encouraging people to go to a certain area, in this case, where there were fruits in the supermarket, then they were able to increase sales of those products. So again, this might be more relevant, for example, to an end user, somebody, for example, to a retailer. So again, we're building up the whole discussion about talking about light, but then making it relevant for whoever it is you're talking to. So let's look at some different ways, perhaps, that you could actually do that. And the next 3 slides actually I'm going to show you are from a colleague in Sweden, Svante Peterson, and here. This is an example of perhaps this is a project. Let's imagine this is a project you're working on, an architectural project where you want to talk about and you're working with your customer to light this doorway, to encourage people to come into through this door. So here's that doorway in the daytime. Here's the same doorway in the evening probably, and so they say, okay, let's put some lights above the door because we want to light the doorway. So that's what, of course, you would get if you put a light source directly above this doorway. Here's another way, of course, of lighting that same doorway with exactly the same quantity of light, by the way, and of course you get a completely different effect. And it depends, of course, what you actually want to achieve in this particular situation. So, doing what so-called mock-ups are one way you can communicate value of light, and just to mention some very obvious things, thinking very carefully about where your audience, whoever that might be, they're going to be standing, is of course critical. So, if, for example, glare is an issue or is a concern, then when you're doing a mock-up, for example, in wherever the project is, then having perhaps this situation where your customer, whoever that might be, is not looking straight into the luminaire, that might be a good idea. And then, of course, it then enables you to actually be able to communicate about something which otherwise, if we go back to the example of just thinking about the representation of lux, would be very difficult to talk about. So for here, in this example, you can see on the right-hand side, there's some functional lights there, if you like, lighting this walkway down to the beach. But it would be very difficult to talk about, why invest in some light to reveal, if you like, the texture on this sand, if you didn't actually show that to people. So there's nothing there's nothing rocket science about this. It's hopefully just bringing some obvious points and packaging them for you, and so we can hopefully have a discussion about it. Now another way you might want to talk about light is, of course, to use a hand sketch. In this case, to represent the layout and then how the light is actually installed, but it also might be actually to be able to show where light is actually going to fall. In this case, on a tree. One thing I particularly like about hand sketches is that they don't attempt to be real. They're not real. Later on, we'll look at computer renderings, and of course, which also have absolutely a place, but of course should be used with great care because they, in a certain way, do attempt to represent reality. Now, we earlier looked at sound and light. And let me just show you in this next image a very real example of how that was used by the well-known lighting designer from Helsinki, Uli Oksanen. And here I remember him giving a presentation actually a very, very long time ago, 1991 sometime, where he actually sang this lighting design. This is actually a village in Finland where he was working on a project there and wanted to be able to communicate communicate about this project. So here, because he has the ability to be able to sing as well, he sang this lighting design, and also actually to the customers people he was actually working with. Starting with low tones here, and then moving up to higher tones. You can see around here, and then when we get to the river area here around here, which you can see here in this cross section, which is shown in this image here, then he really modulated his voice, and it was a very, very exciting way to see a project actually represented. I've certainly never seen a project being kind of shown in that way. So we talked a little bit about sound. We've shown a couple of examples of, for example, mock-ups, doing hand drawings, and other ways to represent light. Let's also just look at another example, linking light and sound. So I'm just going to cut for a couple of, probably about 1 minute to show this. Let me just jump to that. Something called the aura. I need to go back to the beginning. Here we go. So this really also gives the possibility for people to interact with light. Light and sound. So as you approach it, either with your hands or another part of your body, you can then actually interact with it, and then the ambience changes. I won't say any more. Won't mention any more about this right now. Somebody maybe has some questions about that later on. So we mentioned 3D modelling, computer modelling, and of course that absolutely has a place, but of course it needs to be used in the right way, because it can be misleading if it's not represented in the right way. Here, of course, we're trying to show a retail space in two very different situations, and really being able to relatively easily completely change the ambience, and that of course is the advantage of this. And you can show the way that light renders the space in different in the vertical parts of the space, and also of course in this case on the various products. So it can certainly have a role, but it should certainly be used with a lot of care. Another tool you might want to use, of course, is Photoshop type tools, where in this case the idea, what's important here, is to be able to show the impact of the change of the light source, in this case in this waterway, and for people to be able to see actually what in the daytime how that's actually going to be is actually going to change. So there can be really a role there for some relatively simple tools like this as well. Another thing you might want to consider is also using things like demonstration centres. There are a number of these. For example, this is the Outdoor Lighting Application Centre, which we have. There is also an Indoor Lighting Application Centre based in Eindhoven. And these tools really help, particularly people who are managing lighting in cities, in the case of outdoor lighting, and who don't necessarily have any background in light at all, be able to really imagine some of the possibilities that there might be. Then, of course, linking information to that also has a role. So, of course, we can add many things to this. The whole role of lighting and going beyond illumination, of course, is already and will become an increasingly important subject as we go forward. So here, as an example, a retailer with stores around different locations around the world can then be able to zoom in and then real time be able to see how that space is actually used. Where are people actually moving around? For example, with tools like indoor positioning as one example, be able to see where they're moving around, and then actually be able to perhaps plan their spaces better, optimize the use of their spaces better. So I want to just kind of bring the presentation to a close now, and it'll be really interesting to see also what questions you have. Really, I guess the key message is this point about making it appropriate for your audience, and of course there is no end to ways you can do that. It's about being innovative, thinking of who, of course, you're talking to, and what media are there available for you to be able to communicate. It might just simply be a hand sketch. It might be It might even be singing the lighting design, as has been done. But what matters is actually being able to get the message across. So we had a look at a number of different things. We looked at at the really thinking about the fundamental role of light in itself. So light and darkness, and then of course the role of hearing, linking to that, which is something that is very rarely considered in the context of light. And then some basic tools. And of course, there are many other ways that are available to get your message across. Thank you very much indeed for your time.